Alright, let's do the crossfade and say hello. Good morning, everyone. I say everyone optimistically, even though there's probably only a couple people watching, but that's okay. Good morning, whoever's watching, and as always, it's nice to see who's out there, so if you don't mind saying hi, that would be great, either the live stream channel or the Twitch chat. My name is Doc Whalen. This is Digital Studies 101. This is day 4 of week 2 of the summer term, and this is a 5-week term, so we're effectively approaching the midterm for this class, even though it doesn't seem like it. It feels like we just got started, and we still are kind of just getting started, but we'll be done soon too. That's the beauty and challenge of this kind of term. So today, hey, good morning. Thanks for saying hi. So today, this is, as you see, the end of week 2, and this is when we are wrapping up our experience with web literacy as part of the bigger context of digital culture. And so I'm looking here at the homepage for the Canvas course, and just to kind of remind you where we are right now. The big thing this week is completing a fact-checking article for the web literacy assignment. And as you can see throughout the days of the week, each of these things is each day has had at least one activity, sometimes multiple activities that are meant to help you practice the techniques that you'll be using to do a good job on your web literacy article. If you have not completed those steps, then I am concerned that you might not be prepared to write that fact-checking article. So make sure you go back and do those first if you have not already done those. And I'm talking about the things where I've asked you to spot sponsored content, trace a photo upstream, and then use the reading laterally technique to learn about different sources on the web. I've got all this in the checklist for the week, so I'll just kind of go here and kind of remind you where we are. Really, our goal today, and the main thing I want to talk about today, is how to build that fact-checking article, but it's going to be building off of things that have already been covered. So I'm not going to go through the whole process. If you haven't got a sense of how to do this research yet, then you need to go back and watch the other videos or read the material. Right? It's all laid out in the textbook. It's very, I think, clear. So make sure you do that. But here's the checklist for the week. You should complete this web literacy article. There's also a digital culture module, which is on your own. And then, of course, the standard weekly reflection and report. Ultimately, there are basically 4 blog entries due this week if you look at it that way. So for web literacy, you do the fact-checking article, but the main thing that the thing that you actually turn in is a blog post reflecting on that. So there's one blog post. For the culture module, you've got an initial blog post explaining what you plan to do, a final one explaining what you did, and then, of course, a video sharing what you did with your peers in Discord, and then the standard weekly reflection and report. These should be written as 4 separate posts. I mean, if you've already written it as one, as long as they're separately labeled, that's okay. But don't try to do all of these things in a single paragraph, right? I mean, you need multiple paragraphs to really do these things well. So make sure you spread that out. And I do recommend making multiple individual posts for each of these. Okay, so if you have any questions about how to do all that, of course, let me know. All right, so for slides, I do have slides for today, and in fact, I've gone back and shared all of the slides for week 2 in the notes and resources channel in Discord. So if you need to refer back to something that I've done in a slideshow, you can go back and see it there. Of course, the videos themselves are archived on YouTube, and I've been embedding those into each day of notes for class, like this one. So this is today's notes, so I'm going to embed the video that I'm recording right now, at the bottom down here when I'm done. But I mean, it's all there for you to look through and work through in order. And I expect you to know about these things that I'm spending this time streaming and talking and writing about. Okay, so let's talk. I want to talk a bit about. Let's see. Sorry, let me go back to the beginning on my slides here. Again, your goals are to review and comment on other articles, revise your own article, and then keep working on your module. Here's the checklist again. I did want to talk a bit about before getting into writing, I wanted to go back to a couple of the activities from the web literacy textbook, some things that I want to make sure you're all doing. And if you look at, this is the web literacy activity that asks you to evaluate a site. And I went through and I made quite a few comments because I think a lot of you might have missed the point of this assignment, and that I want to make sure that you get this. The idea is not to actually evaluate the site. You're not actually looking at the site, deciding if it has good content or not. You're finding what other people think about this website. And if you have not done that, then you need to go back and do it again. If you did it and you didn't really, it wasn't clear to me, then go in and add something to the table field where you did that. And I left several comments here, and I've blanked out the column with people's names in it, so I'm not going to reveal anything there. But for example, if you're writing about the Sydney Morning Herald, you shouldn't be saying that your writing is well structured. You should say that according to plenty of other sources, they cite this as a reputable source, and give me examples of people that cite it. So do it like I did in the first row here, where I said, according to the SPLC, right? So I've said, I'm not looking at CIS on its own terms. I'm not trying to decide if their arguments make sense. I'm not looking at that content at all, really. I'm looking at what I found on Google by doing that specific kind of search where you exclude CIS.org from the search results, and then you look at what other people say about it, and that led me straight to Wikipedia and the SPLC and a bunch of other sites that gave me a very clear impression of the reliability of this site. And that's what I'm basing these comments on here. I'm not basing my comments on my assessment of that site. It's what other people that I trust think about this site. And that's what I want you to say here in these things. And if you haven't done that, then I've probably left a comment on that, and I've probably asked you to clarify or add a little bit more. Okay, so a lot of you still haven't done this yet, so that's kind of one reason I wanted to leave the comments, so that if you're coming into this a little bit later, you'll see my comments on other people's, and you'll kind of know what to what to make sure you're doing. I guess that's my goal there. And there's plenty more to choose from, but you can also do your own. For any of these could have more to it. So if you add more to, for example, Occupy Democrats, then you can just add add to the respective column for each of those, and then just add your name in that final column with the reviewed by column to add your name to it. Okay, so make sure you do that. Make sure you do it right. I mean, this is the idea. I want to see that I want you to show me that you're using the techniques that I've been teaching. So that's one of them. Doing that reading laterally technique of finding out what other people say about it. Okay, the other things. So make sure you go take a look in Discord. The other ones I don't want to pull up Discord right now, but if you look at the viral photos and the spotting sponsored content activity, I noticed that some of you didn't complete that. Like, you just did the first half of it, which was to post your initial thoughts. But again, the training here is to try to not trust your initial gut instinct, your gut feeling, your emotional response to things, but instead actually look at some things and make a reasonable decision based on that. So make sure you actually complete that activity by actually going through and counting the sponsored content and then sharing that result. And of course, this is something that would be good to reflect on either in the thread that you create in Discord or in your weekly reflection post, because I think the results may surprise you. For example, I'm looking at it. Almost everybody put BuzzFeed as their first choice in the initial ranking. Not everybody, but most people. So, did that actually bear out? Is that actually the case, or is there, something else that you found? Okay, so I just saw a question come in, and this is a DM, so I won't call you out by name, but it is a good question, so I will go ahead and answer it. This was a question about the web literacy assignment. And the question was, once you start getting comments on your document, I'm going to jump into the documents in a second, but once you start getting comments on your document, just work on that one document. Don't make another copy of that, right? So just keep all of the edits on that one document. And you can resolve comments if you feel like you've addressed what it is. The document history is all visible, so as long as I have access to that eventually, then that's fine. But that's just keep it one document. Yeah. And I'll just go ahead and type that. So, in case that person is not actually watching live. Okay, so that's a bit of things about that. Now, I also shared something in the troubleshooting channel, I think, that might be helpful. Some of you seem to be unclear about or missed a step in terms of sharing the document in a way that lets other people edit it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll demo it here now, but I also did make a video showing you. It's a process with steps that are kind of hard to describe if you're doing it just by words. So I think sometimes a visual is really helpful. So here's a document, and if my goal is to share it so other people can comment, this is all you got to do. I say all. I mean, it is actually more than you would think, or more than it probably should be, but maybe Google will get around to making this a more straightforward process. So here's what you do. So here's this document. I want to get other people in this to comment on it. I'm viewing it in editing mode, obviously, because I created this document. I own it. I can edit it. But I want other people to be able to comment on it. And so what I need to do is share it. So up here, there's this big button that says share. And if you hover over it, you'll see that the current status is that it's private only to me. That means no one else can see it. If I copy the URL for this document and send it to someone else in Discord, they won't be able to access it. What we need instead is to share it in a way that other people can access it. So click the share button. And then this part down here, the get link section. So here's a link that says change to anyone with a link. Click on that. And then now that changes the status of the document. And now I've got this ability here to change it from anyone with a link can, and then I can set that to view, comment, or edit. And what I'm suggesting, what I'm asking you to do for now is switch it to comment. Okay, so now that's changed the access permissions on the document, and now I can copy the link and paste that link in Discord for other people to see. So please do that. I recorded a GIF of myself doing this earlier today, and I put that in troubleshooting just so you can see all the steps to it. It's kind of like you have to kind of know where to click, and then things change based on previous selections, so it's sort of hard to just have a single screenshot demonstrating what to do. So that's why I thought a GIF would be helpful to make sure you get that out there. If you don't do it this way, no one else can see your document and give you feedback on it. Okay. I'm going to also pose a question here, and this is going to be something that, I'm missing a window here. Let me start this. So I want to talk a bit about the writing style that I want you to use for these articles, but before I do that, I'll just pose this as a question. I'm going to go through all of your articles and give you suggestions and comments and stuff to help you improve them. But I think it would be helpful if any one of you are willing for me to do that on the live stream today. In other words, I will take, if you let me, I will look at your article on the live stream and give you comments on it here. And the reason that could be valuable is that other people who are still working on theirs or haven't written them yet would benefit from seeing that, and of course you would benefit. Now that means being willing to share your work in progress and sort of receive criticism publicly. So if you're not willing to do that, that's fine. I'm not going to force anyone to do it, but I'll put that out there for now. If you're willing for me to give you feedback on your document live on the stream today, then let me know. If not, no worries. Okay, and I got one volunteer already. Okay, great. So I have not looked at yours yet, Nadi Bobadi, but I will do that. I mean, this will have to reveal your actual name probably. I think your name is probably on the document. I guess you can delete it if you'd rather keep that off of there, but it might be inevitable. So think about that for a second, and then let me talk a bit about the style of writing that I want you all to practice for this, and see if that may be helpful. Some of this is pretty concrete advice, right? So when we're thinking about this article, let me actually pull up the template so that I can show it to you. I mean, the template is kind of hard to demonstrate some of these things with because literally there's nothing in it. So, where is it? There it is. Okay. So this is the template. But let me kind of give you a few things that might be helpful, perhaps. There you go. So instead of writing things with I'm going to give you a list of things that are a series of slides that show you something that you should probably avoid and then something you should do instead. And so in this case, I'm saying instead of indenting your paragraphs, use fully left justified text. That's standard for writing on the web. That's standard for even a Google Doc. Some people still indent out of habit, but please don't. It's actually, I think, harder to read on a screen than it is. I mean, it's good on paper, but it's not good on a screen. So I really like the left justify. Please do that, like I've done here with each of these. So the heading should be left justified. The text should be fully left justified. And then there should be a line between paragraphs. So if I hit, and that's the default in the Google Doc. So if I add paragraphs, right, it's going to just start the next paragraph on a new line with space between the paragraphs to show that separation. So do that. Please do that. Also, I would recommend and request don't too much with the styling, like in terms of the font size and so on. Just kind of keep it very straightforward, very bland looking, right? That'll make it actually work better. Okay, so keep it left justified. All right, don't And also try not to change the headings. If you, I do like the structure that I have. I want consistency with these. So, I mean, across different articles, I want them to be basically formatted the same way. And I'll show you why eventually. But this is, basically, I want to compile all these together in a way that everyone can access and then benefit from. Like, they can be helpful as fact-checking documents. So I want them to be fairly uniform in their structure. And that structure is there for a reason, too. I mean, I gave you this template on purpose. So try not to change the template too much. If you feel like there's an important extra like subheading to add, that's probably okay. If you also want to add a timeline heading, that could be okay. I would be okay with that. These shouldn't be heading 1s, but I'll just go ahead and make them heading 1s for now. You can also, so in the timeline, you could use, this is where you could post the trends graph that I showed you all the other day. If you have that, I mean, some of these things won't really lend themselves to that kind of analysis, but if it's the kind of thing that people might have been searching for, then the Google Trends graph could be pretty interesting, and you could post that in this section of the document if that's the case. If that's not the case, then that's all right. Sometimes the timeline of these things can be really important, the timeline of these claims, like when they started coming out. Like when, you know, and even down to like minute by minute kind of things. You know, as we unfortunately saw with the shootings recently, right? I mean, there have been several, like, I guess, rounds of misinformation, or just, I mean, it's not even, some of it could be disinformation, like people doing these things on purpose, but I think a lot of it's just the confusion and chaos of an unfolding tragedy. And so there are things that you can kind of look at in terms of when people started, for example, sharing potential, like one of the big issues, one of the big categories of misinformation are people incorrectly identifying the shooter online. So finding like a social media profile and saying, oh, that's the shooter, and then like people descend on that person and attack that person. And there's been many of those mistaken identities happening. So looking at the timeline of when those were misidentified might give you a sense a bit of the motivation behind the misidentification. I think some of them might have been actually trolling, like actually targeting, harassing people. There were particularly, for whatever reason, I don't even know, several trans women who were misidentified as the shooter and attacked as a result. So that could have been like targeted, a form of cyberbullying essentially. So that's the kind of thing that could be interesting, or it could be relevant to have time-specific information about that. If that's the case, then a timeline section makes sense for yours. If that doesn't make sense for yours, don't feel obligated to include the timeline. So I'll add a note about this to the template. I'll just go ahead and add that to the template, right? Might as well. And make it blue to signify you should delete this if you do add this section. Okay. There we go. So that's that advice. Okay, let's try some more advice. Instead of long paragraphs, short paragraphs. So if you're writing essays, sometimes a long paragraph is the right way to get an idea across, or a group of ideas. Here we're writing for the web, so short paragraphs, 2-3 sentences, that's plenty for a paragraph. Keep it short and punchy, make each paragraph have a clear single point, then get to the next one, and that's a good way to write. If you have multiple examples, for example, each one should have its own paragraph. If you have different sources of evidence, each one should have its own paragraph, right? So almost think of it as like an expanded or a beefy kind of list, almost, not so much an essay as a list. Okay, so this is, and I'll talk a bit more about a neutral point of view, but really you want to try to write this like a Wikipedia article, like in the style of a Wikipedia article. And what I mean by that is avoiding things like a first-person pronoun. So this should not be the story of how you decided to research this topic and what you found and what you thought about it. This is not about you. This is about your question, about the claim that you're investigating. So avoid pronouns. First person doesn't really make sense. Second person, absolutely not. Even this is something like it's a weak style of writing for this kind of context, and it also, it kind of misses the point of this kind of thing. We're not trying to figure out what you think about this topic. We want to figure out, is this thing true or false? And that's something that has nothing to do with your perspective on it. So make sure that you do that first of all, and one way to make sure you're doing that is avoiding using pronouns. So that's some advice there. Similarly, try to avoid things like "in my opinion." Right? We're in the realm of facts here. We're avoiding opinions as much as possible. So this is not about your opinion about things, or in my view, or I think. All of those things weaken your research. So say what is true, what is false, not what your opinion is. Here's another way of avoiding first person. Instead of saying "I found many examples," say "here's an example," and then have that example there. You can link directly to it if it's an online thing. I recommend using archive.today links instead of direct links. Screenshots also work okay, but make sure you actually have the example. Don't just say that the examples exist. Actually include them in your document in some way. Okay, so let's talk about neutral point of view, and this is Wikipedia's guidelines for this. If you've ever written or worked on a Wikipedia article, then this is the kind of thing that you should bear in mind as you do that. I don't know if anyone's doing the Wikipedia module this week, but it's a really interesting process and surprisingly challenging. Like, you think, oh, Wikipedia is just this thing out there that anybody can add whatever to, but there's actually a lot of structure involved in creating an article and in making sure an article is good. And one of the things that good Wikipedia editors learn how to do is write in this neutral point of view style, or write in this style here. So neutral point of view isn't just an attitude or disposition towards information. It is that, but it is also a way of writing in a way that gets that across. So some specific sections of this that could be helpful is the pronoun section. So let me just jump down to it if I can. Oh, maybe it's not in here anymore. Maybe it's not in here. Where's the table of contents? Maybe it's been given a different subtitle now. Let's see. Yeah, this is having to do with conflicts. This is. Let's see. There's a lot here. So, I'm trying to think of what's the best way into this. Don't teach the controversy. Yeah, let the reader decide. Yeah. Peacock terms. Yeah, this is good too. I mean, this bit about puffery and about weasel words, these are good things to avoid. Maybe this is the pronoun bit. You know, honestly, this is probably a good page to include too. I'm going to go ahead and add this one to our resources Discord channel. These are pretty concrete examples of things to try to not do or do, and this is I want you to write in as neutral a way as possible, and so these are the kind of things that can help you avoid doing that. If you avoid editorializing, avoid using euphemisms and cliches, avoid using pronouns majorly. That's the main thing. This paragraph is one I took a screenshot of. I guess so, because I guess it's good because I can't find the actual discussion of that. It's in the manual of style. Let me see the URL. Manual of style. No, it is the manual of style, right? Okay, well, I guess here it is. I'll go ahead and put this particular subheading link in Discord as well. So this is the section. I think this section's been rewritten since I took that screenshot before. But again, some really specific, concrete advice. And if you're not clear about how to write without pronouns or why it's an issue, this is the direction. This is the section I would direct you to read. And I just put the link in Discord. I can provide a link to it in the notes today as well. Okay, so try to write like this. And in terms of new things for you to do today, in terms of assignments, this is really it. I'm not asking you to do any more activities, any new activities with the Web Literacy textbook, but try to follow the style guidelines here as much as possible. Okay, great. So a few other things, right? So instead of drawing your own conclusions, this kind of goes back to the reading laterally advice. Your goal isn't to assess these on your own. You're not going to be able to do original research here. You shouldn't do original research here, so you should instead cite and quote expert conclusions about this. So we are appealing to authority here. We're not appealing to logic or appealing to a motion or any other of the rhetorical appeals that exist, it said we are appealing to authority. We're going to find out, is there an authoritative answer to this question? And if so, we are going to provide a link to it or an explanation of it or paraphrase of it. That's what our job is as investigators here. I've tried not to use the term researcher here because you're not really going out and, like on vaccines, you're not going to go out and do epidemiological research on your own. You're going to find out someone who's already done that research, has proven that their conclusions are valid, and then you cite them, you point to them, and that's our job here. Okay, so reviewing specific articles, I am willing to do this, and we have had one volunteer. And Naidi Wabadi, I've been referring to you as your screen name. I guess I will need to. I'm gonna try not to show your actual name if you would prefer. So, but if you don't mind, you can just tell me because it would make something a little bit easier. Let me just. I'm gonna open this first in another window to make sure that it looks like the right thing. Okay, great. All right, good. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can pull this up on the screen without showing names. Yeah, that makes sense. Let me just, okay, that's good to know, thanks. Let me just make a slight change here. There's also some comments here, and I'm trying to see if I can just view it in a way without seeing comments. Okay. All right, so I think okay, I think I've got it. So let me pull it into my window here so I can show it up on the big screen and or on the stream screen and talk about it here a little bit. And I have not really looked at this, so I'm going to, this is pretty much straightforward. I mean, this is pretty much a raw kind of take on this. Okay, is the rising price of gas in the United States Biden's fault? And your answer is mostly no. Now this is, I mean, you're right, we want to do yes and no as the main answer, and sometimes we can't be 100% sure. And I feel like maybe that's why you're qualifying it with mostly. But if it's, I guess you've looked at this, so you know better than I do. But is it, 95% no or like 70% no? Like the mostly no to me is kind of a unclear in terms of how confident it is. I mean, I don't know to me if it's 90% confidence, I would just go no. But yeah, again, that's sort of a call on your part. But we want to go as close to no as possible or yes as possible, whichever it is. So maybe you might want to rethink that phrasing just a little bit. Okay, so here we've got some examples, hopefully, of it in a Breitbart article. So this is, okay, so Breitbart, I guess, trying to coin the phrase Bidenflation. I haven't seen that before, but kind of a nice ring to it, actually. And so this is, I mean, I haven't read this article, but I think the point of view of Breitbart is pretty clear, and I can kind of guess what some of these talking points are in here. So that's this is at least a pretty substantive set of claims and evidence, right? The main example I was thinking of is just the stickers on the gas pumps, right? I mean, that's something that people do, and it is essentially asserting this as well, that that's Biden's fault. So if you have a picture of one of those, that would be a good illustration for, if you can find one, that would be a good illustration for this article. Saw one at Wawa the other day and I took it off. But this is the way that claim is being circulated a lot. You've also got a tweet from Ron DeSantis. So with this one, I think these are both good. I mean, these are both good examples of it. And he's using Bidenflation again. I mean, okay, so there's a sort of a misleading claim here, but this is a tweet. Now, I don't see any reason why Ron DeSantis would delete this or change this, but tweets are a little bit ephemeral, and so especially for tweets, and even for things like Breitbart, I think I would recommend, if you're going to provide a link instead of a screenshot, I would say use archive.today instead. So that way for one thing, you aren't sending traffic to Breitbart, right? I mean, if you're saying this is a problematic source, then you don't want to tell people to visit this problematic source. So archive.today is a way to avoid that. It looks like somebody did this 7 minutes ago. Maybe that was you. So this gives us a snapshot that we can actually already use, and this is good. So what you would do essentially is Where's the, yeah, maybe is this the URL? Yeah, so this is the URL. So if you want to link to this one, you can do it in your right the same place you did it already, which is a good use of a link. This is a good way to use a link, but maybe change the direction of this link to that archive.today link instead. Same with the Twitter thing. World Tribune. Yeah, I don't know the World Tribune, but again, same kind of thing you might want to do. Window on the, I don't know anything about the World Tribune, but I'm seeing a few kind of, I don't want to say red flags, but definitely signals that this has a particular point of view. And there's the, okay, it has the I did that sticker there, so that's something. 26 gallons of gas, that's a big gas tank. That's the problem there. You got a huge car, probably a truck. Okay, so the, all right, so let me kind of read this a little bit more closely now. I think these are all good examples of this claim being made. And that's all you want to do. Like, you don't really want to do much in terms of analyzing or responding to those. Just really explain that these are examples and these are good. I like these nice, really short paragraphs, like sentence long paragraphs. That's good. Let me just see. During the election, okay. So this one, I would recommend a couple of revisions here. I would say Snopes and others documented examples of I don't know, false claims about gas prices. So, because I think you've got a pretty strong claim in the second sentence, and it seems like maybe a missing word here. This theory, when coming from conservative, oh no, it isn't missing. Is often accompanied with a general blame. Yeah, I think you're right, but you're appealing to a generalization here, and general blame, to me that feels a little bit too vague. I feel like maybe you just want to say that this is the tactic has been used frequently. I mean, and we've got examples of it. I guess this one, to me, I guess, so when you say that the prices are easy to fake, I feel like that might miss the question a little bit, or it might be a way of avoiding the real question. So I wonder if there's more to say about this in the background discussion. Like, yeah, it's not so much to me. It's not so much that they're easy to fake. It's that they're easy to miscontextualize, or to kind of put in isolation as though it attributes any kind of graph. It's always easy to contextualize a graph or any other kind of data in a way that supports your point of view. Like, whatever the data is, two different people could use the same data to argue opposite points. I mean, that's one of the tricky things with data, and I think that's part of what's happening here too. So there may be cases of people literally making fake graphs, but you'd really need to point to a specific example of that. But the idea, I think, is it's more about mischaracterization or miscontextualization. So that's maybe a suggestion to add to this section, the background section. Okay, then. Okay, so. Okay, so this is good. I mean, so I like the final section here a lot. I think this is good. So to me, I would just add one thing to it. So one thing generally to each of these examples. I think this bit of evidence is great, but I want you to I really want you to point to the reliability of these points of evidence specifically as much as possible. So I'm just kind of looking at these, and I can preview this, and I can see that this is a chart. This is NBC News. This is in New York Times. This is Marketplace. So these are reliable sources, but those reliable sources are going to be not just drawing their own conclusions, but like Marketplace, they usually like interview economists. So is there some economist that explains that this is the background, or like this is the real reason? I mean, ultimately, you say it's disputed, but maybe say like, inflation is complicated and it's influenced by a number of different factors, and economists disagree on which factors are most important. And you could cite examples. So for example, so-and-so from the Cato Institute says whatever, and then so and so from the Brookings Institute says whatever. Like you could, if you can find specific examples, and they might just, in those examples probably are in these articles. I didn't look at these, but I'll just take a quick look at the NBC News one. They probably cite sources because they, they're not economists themselves. But yeah, here's one. So here's Dean Baker from the left-leaning Center for Economic and Policy Research. So they've cited a source, and this is this person's assessment of it. There's another source here, Wessel. So there's a confluence of factors, and it's both. And so Wessel, I don't know how you'd say that, but Wessel from the Brookings Institute, which tends to be more conservative than this other one, like they're showing you multiple points of view. They're saying this is a complicated issue, and here are two experts' points of view on it that disagree about the different factors, but neither of them are going to say it's definitely Biden's fault. And so that's the real answer to your question, is that it's complicated, and here's how complicated it is. So yeah, just to boil that advice down, I would say it's great to point to these sources, but actually go ahead and identify economists as the source of that dispute, or as the context for that dispute, and just basically that it's complicated. And you should name them. I mean, you can go ahead and name them in here. According to an economist cited in an NBC article, that would be another way to do that. Okay, but I like the simplicity and clarity of your writing. I think it's very straightforward. So I think I don't have too much to add in terms of stylistic edits. I would say just the final sentence. I always try to recommend not starting a sentence or a paragraph with "there is," because like, where is, and it's a pronoun, and so it doesn't have a clear antecedent when it's used that way. So just say some have pointed to evidence, and some have pointed to Biden policies that have contributed to inflation, but also I guess it could. The other, question that occurs to me as I'm looking at the evidence section, though, is you want to make sure to tie these all back to the gas prices, because I think you're right that ultimately all these things are connected, but it is a slightly different question, because inflation in general versus gas prices specifically, gas prices have specific factors that are part of this, that are wrapped up in the bigger picture of inflation, at least from my understanding, but they also have their own specific issues about supply and demand that might be somewhat isolated from the bigger picture of federal monetary policy, I guess. So basically just make sure you get back to that in terms of that, like you're doing here in this third sentence, actually. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so I kind of rambled through that. I hope that was helpful in some way for this writer who I'm grateful for letting me talk through this on the stream. If anyone else is watching and you'd like for me to look at your article, I'm happy to do that as well. I have some time here. But if not, that's okay. I'm going to just go through and add text comments to it, but mostly this one's great. So I think just to add a few pretty minor tweaks really in the bigger picture. It's following the structure. It's clearly written. This is a good. If you are watching this and you haven't written your article yet, then you should view this as a pretty good example of how to do it. And also, well, finally, to this writer, once you feel like you're done with it, the text doesn't have to be blue anymore. You can make it black, I guess, or dark gray, whatever it actually is in the theme. Okay, great. So thanks for letting me take a look at that. If you feel like letting me look at it in the same way, I'm happy to do that. But if not, that's all right. I just have a few more things to wrap up today. Okay, and that just has to do with reflecting on your work and thinking back throughout this week. Remember, there are essentially 4 blog posts due this week, and the big one, or the final one, is this one where you're reflecting on, web literacy. So think about what you learned about the information landscape of the web. Something that you take for granted. I saw a few of you actually chatting in the web literacy channel, the initial channel for this, that you were surprised to learn a few things about how things work in terms of the reliability of information on social media. A couple of you mentioned you were surprised that there isn't tighter control on the accuracy of content shared on social media. I mean, there is a bit, but there's very little, and so it's kind of still the Wild West in some ways as far as who can post what on Facebook and Twitter. Certain topics will get flagged automatically, but not many, and those flags aren't perfect, and there's plenty of misinformation on Facebook and Twitter, certainly. And that's part of what we need to understand as we think about how to use that information. That's the landscape I'm talking about. Okay, so then as you think about digital culture, so this is those 2 blog post things. Just keep in mind when you record that video, please share it in the channel that I created for that. That's what is the name of that? It's under the sharing category. and it's called Module Reflections. So share your video there, direct link if possible, or upload it if you can, if it's small enough. And something to kind of focus on in terms of thinking about this is like, what were your surprises or challenges? Like, what was something that you didn't think to be hard, but it turned out to be hard? What was something that really challenged you? Something that you learned that you didn't expect to learn? Those are the kind of things that make interesting reflections. So that's my recommendation there for that digital culture video. And then finally, as you think about the week as a whole, right? So there's still a separate thing here. Think about everything you did, and that includes the contributions. There's a lot of things this week where I sent you to Discord to have conversations or share the results of different activities. So did you do those? Did you do them on time? Did you do whatever? Oh, bye. Thanks for watching again, Al. Did you? Yeah, I mean, what grade? Like, ultimately, give yourself a grade. That's an exercise in thinking through your work in terms of what you think my expectations are. So I think it's a useful thing to practice for this week. Okay, so I am, as you can maybe tell from the number of slides I'm at 17 out of 17. So I'm pretty much at the end of what I had planned to talk about today. Again, like yesterday, a little bit early. That's fine. I'm happy wrapping things up a little bit early. Of course, this is being archived and available online in a few minutes after. Well, I mean, you can watch it straight from Twitch pretty soon, but I'll be uploading it. I've been downloading them from Twitch and re-uploading them to YouTube just because I feel like that does a better job with the subtitles for some reason. So I've been doing that, and I'll do that for today as well. Obviously, if, like I've always said, if you things are due Friday, which is tomorrow, and you are mostly kind of on your own to do that at this point. I've given you lots of content and instructions and advice. So follow that advice, look through that content, watch the videos. But you're more or less on your own, and except that I am available on Discord. If you see my green dot online, you can always chat me up there if you have a question, or if you're not sure how to proceed through something, or you can't find the template document or whatever you need help with. Feel free to reach out. That's what I'm here to do. So next week is going to be our obviously third week, and it's going to be focused on a project I call the object lesson, and that's going to be a project with several steps to it. And kind of like this week, I recommend following those steps in order, even if you're doing them after the fact. I'm going to try to put as much up and online as early as possible, so you can work ahead if you have time to do that. Also, probably Monday and Tuesday, at least next week, I will pre-record a video instead of live streaming, just because I have an online conference that I will be attending during the hours that I normally stream, and so I might be able to take a break from the conference, but I think it'd be easier if I just don't worry too much about that and pre-record, and then I'll probably be back live on Wednesday and Thursday next week. Okay, so that's all I got. I will be switching over to what I call the outro scene shortly, and thanks for watching. Thanks for letting me review one of your articles. If you have questions about things, let me know. Oh, and one final word: as you see me leaving comments on your documents, try and address those issues that I point out. If I point out an issue, if I say this is a problem, here's something, can you add more to this? Please do that, because that will make these articles stronger, and it'll do better. It'll be more useful. Okay, so cool. Well, I'm going to wrap things up here then, and restart the music. I went with a different soundtrack for today. I went with chiptunes instead of the normal lo-fi stuff. I felt like I needed to inject some energy into this weirdly cold and cloudy day at the end of May. All right. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you next week.